All right. So let's talk creation myth. How did all of this stuff come to be? Right. You're going to notice some things in the Norse creation myth that are similar to other creation myths that you've seen. I'm going to point out a couple of them and then I'm going to kind of leave it because it's going to be one of your assignments, is going to be to kind of compare and contrast and see where we're seeing similarities and differences between all these creation myths that we've seen up to this point. Because at this point, you guys have seen a fair amount. And there's something very funny about these stories is that we keep kind of telling the same stories over and over again. So we'll kind of see where we're seeing some similarities and where we're seeing differences. So the Norse are often called Vikings, though my I have a brother-in-law who's a professor of British history in England, and he never uses the word Viking. He's very anti-Viking because he doesn't think it actually means anything. But we're going to use Viking because we're not medieval archaeologists, and it's okay if we do that. So they were a series of tribes that inhabited northern Europe, right? So we're looking at Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. Okay. And they were raiders. They raided all along continental Europe, right, all along the coastline, as well as the British Isles, so England, Ireland, Scotland, and well, Wales didn't exist, but those kind of two big islands over there. And they were very, very good at what they did, which was mostly pillaging everybody's stuff and kind of taking it for their own, which I imagine didn't make them super popular. But that's the people that I'm talking about, right? Are who we think of as Vikings, right? They're in the boats, they pillage, they steal, they're big warriors, and they have these very specific gods. So obviously, anytime we're dealing with something this old, written record is something that's always a little bit tricky, right? In this time period, very, very few people could read and write. So the Norse myths were only in oral form the entire time that they were actually central to religious belief. So the time when people legitimately worshipped these gods and goddesses as a legitimate religion, the way that we see Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, etc. uh, it was only in oral form. It was an oral tradition. Later, after Northern Europe becomes Christian, and we're starting to see the kind of rise of the Anglo-Saxons and things like that, do we actually see them writing these stories down? The problem is that weakens the tradition in several ways, right? So one, we don't have a coherent body of literature, which means like we don't have a Bible. We don't have one book whose whole job is to tell us what it was that they believed. Instead, we have a collection of stories that are written down by a different religion, right? Which means that there's a fair amount of alterations that happen. I don't know if any of you are in senior English, but when I teach Beowulf, that's something that I focus on pretty heavily, is how Beowulf is this really weird mix of pagan and Christianity because it was written by a Christian monk, but it's pulled from this pagan tradition, and then they just kind of push those things together. So we see all these like weird shoehornings in of God and religion and kind of Christian ideals of goodness and that kind of thing, hand in hand with a somewhat kind of barbaric and warlike setting and structure and things like that. So there's some tension in that, and we see that in the Norse mythology as well, where it doesn't just kind of fix, it doesn't quite fit the way that it would if it had been written by the people who legitimately believed in it at the time when it was popular. The third thing is that they were written down as myths. They were written down as stories. So they are fictionalizing these stories, which were at one point religious, right? They were as important as any religion that we have today. The other thing is that Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark occupy a pretty large geographical chunk, right? So you're looking at different cultures, different languages, and different kind of geographical nations, right? Which is why we don't use the term Viking, because those weren't homogenous, right? They weren't all just kind of one monolith of a people. Instead, we're kind of it's a little bit more complicated than these are the Vikings and this is what they all did, right? They all did a lot very different things, which is why the Norse mythology that we have currently, the stories are a little bit more complicated, like I said in the intro PowerPoint, in that we don't really know a lot of what's going on, and we have some characters that are repeated. Sometimes different things happen to them, all that kind of thing. Okay. like are Freya and Frigg different people? Stuff like that is why we have that problem. So thankfully, we have the prose and poetic Edda, right? Prose is just written. Poetry, obviously, is that kind of like more of like singing. It would have been sung, or it would have had a meter or anything like that. But that's where we get most of our ideas about Norse religion, and we know exactly who wrote them, right? Snorri Sturluson in the 13th century wrote the prose Edda and the poetic Edda, and that's where we get the vast majority of our information about Norse mythology when it existed as a religion. And we're pretty sure it hasn't been altered at all, or if not, at least a little bit. So the Norse creation myth starts with Gnungagap. So there's lots of fun words in Norse, obviously, that I'm going to try and pronounce as well as I can. But I am not from those lands, so I'll try my best. So the Gnungagap was just a big emptiness, right? And we've seen that in like the Chinese myth. Where you've got this vast swirling emptiness and a giant egg, and then Pangu cracks out of the egg, right? We've seen things like that, right? So you have this vast emptiness. And to the south of this emptiness, I don't know how there's a south or a north in emptiness, but we do. We have the fiery realm of Muspel. So Muspel was all volcanoes and rivers of fire and all that kind of thing. And it was obviously didn't have anything in it because it was just fire and poison and all that kind of thing. So we've got this big emptiness and then fire right below it to the south. To the north, we have an icy cold realm called Niflheim, right? We've got icy fountains, we've got these big mountains, and nothing grows there either. It's dark, everything is just big blocks of solid ice. Okay, so you've got nothingness in the middle, you've got cold to the north, heat to the south. So eventually, over many, many, many years, Muspel would have these, volcanic explosions basically, and it's shooting off sparks. And eventually, they made it far enough that some of these fiery blasts from Muspel are able to melt the mountains of Niflheim. And out of that melting ice, we get the first living being in Ginnungagap, and that's Ymir. And he is this giant frost giant that is pictured right here. So once Ymir is fr fr freed from this kind of frozen, icy wasteland, it starts to keep happening, right? So then, obviously, what comes next is a cow. I don't know why it's a cow. Um, I got nothing. But a cow comes out, right? So the cow licks the ice from the mountains and starts uh, bringing these mountains down, right? And they those go away. And as the cow is licking the ice from the mountains, Ymir drinks the cow's milk and he gains sustenance. Eventually, she licks enough of this mountain down that two more gods emerge from the ice, Buri and his goddess wife. They have a son together who they name Odin, who is the god of all gods, right? He's our Zeus. He's the king here. So Ymir is cruel and brutal, and everybody hates him. Again, you should be getting echoes of Kronos here, right? Um, think about those Titans. Nobody liked them. They kept eating their children. It made people upset. So then they kill Ymir, Odin, and all the other gods. They kill him, and his body becomes the earth, right? So his huge body becomes the earth. His blood becomes the sea. His flesh becomes the land. His bones the mountain. His hairs the trees. Again, you should be getting echoes of Chinese and Greek mythology here. And Odin and the other gods form the sky with the skull, and it's held up by these four towering pillars, right? So he becomes the earth as we know it. Odin, because he's very powerful, creates the sun and the moon from muspels. He comes and gets sparks from that area, and the sun and moon melt all the rest of the ice that we see here, and we have plants and trees begin to grow in Ginnungagap. Okay, so he does his little let there be light moment. He creates everything, and now we have a much more habitable world. What we're missing at this point is people. So this is a really nice kind of depiction of what the nine realms looks like, right? So we've got Muspel down here, Niflheim, right, our realms of fire and ice, respectively. We have Hell, which is the underworld. We have Svartalfheim, which is where the dwarves would have come from, right? And then here in the middle, you've got Midgard, and then around it is we have these kind of icy peaks, and that's Jotunheim. That's where all of the kind of giants were from, the like frost giants that we talked about a little bit earlier. We have the Bifrost, which is what Heimdall is in charge of, and he kind of keeps safe. Nidavellir, I believe, is the road that would take you to the realm of the dwarves, which is Svartalheim. And then up here, we have Asgard, Vanaheim, and Alfheim. So Asgard, right, is the realm of the Asgardians, right, of the Aesir. Vanaheim is the land of the Vanir, which are that other kind of group of gods, and then Alfheim is the realm of elves. And then through all of it, we have this tree Yggdrasil, right, which is the world tree. It grows all the way through the very center of the earth, and it links all of the 9 realms together, and it becomes a little bit more important too when we're talking about the creation of people. So Odin loves this place. He thinks it's great. He calls it Midgard, which means middle land, because it's right here, right in the middle of everything that's going on. So as I mentioned, all that Midgard was missing was something other than the gods. And that's when Odin decides to make people. So he's walking along, he sees 2 fallen trees. He sees an ash tree and an elm tree, and he picks them up from the mud and he creates the first man and the first woman for them. He breathes life into them, he gives them reason, feelings, hearing, sight. He makes them into what we are. Again, should be getting some hints of other mythologies here. He names the man Ask. He names the woman Embla. You can guess which one each one came from, right? The man came from the ash tree. The woman came from the elm. And from these 2 come the entire human race. So they're the Norse version of Adam and Eve. And their job is to look after Midgard, right? And then the gods leave Midgard and ascend to Asgard, which is their realm in heaven and where they end up living. So the giants are still understandably upset about the death of Ymir, and they're trying to find a way to take their revenge on all these gods that killed him. Now, sadly, actually dealing with the gods is kind of out of their power. They're not powerful enough to actually do any damage to Odin and the rest of his brood. So what they decide to do instead is to mess with people, right? Because those are what Odin created. So it's a way of kind of getting at him through his creations. So at the foot of Yggdrasil, at the very base of the world tree, they started carving lines into it, and each line was a human life. There were twists and turns, and it starts with his birth and it ends with his death. And at the end of each line, they made a deep cut through the tree to ensure that humans would die and be mortal and thus would never be as powerful as the gods. The giant sisters created such powerful spells that Odin could not change them, and humans were mortal from then on out. Yggdrasil becomes known as the Tree of Life, and now humans know death, right? And that is kind of a part of our existence. Okay, I'm going to be doing one more of these videos to walk you guys through Ragnarok. But obviously, in between that, you're going to have a bunch of stories about the different day-to-day lives of these gods and what they do and that kind of thing. So hopefully you're enjoying it so far. We got lots more good Norse mythology content for you coming.